and welcome everybody. This is the call to order of the Amherst County Board of Supervisors meeting. Let the record reflect it is April 5th, 2022, and the time is 3 p.m. First, we need an approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions that we need to make? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Tom Martin to lead us in the invocation and the pledge of allegiance.
Please bow your heads. Our Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for everyone that is gathered here today to be about the county's business, Father. We pray for your wisdom and decisions and information that is shared here today, Father. Lord, we lift up our great country to you, and we lift up this world. We pray for peace. Father, we pray for our county employees, our police, and our fire and rescue personnel, and pray your safety on them, Lord. Father, above all, we thank you for your Son, and it's in his name we ask it and pray. Amen.
Amen.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Sir.
Next, we have citizen comments. We have no one signed up. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak, please come forward. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close citizen comments, and we'll move on to ordinance first reading 2022-0003. This is Chapter 30, Animals, to make revisions to county code regarding dangerous dogs. I believe this will go to Mr. Popovich.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this ordinance is intended to revise your current dangerous dog ordinance to reflect changes made to the Code of Virginia by the General Assembly, so it's just minor technical revisions.
All right. I've read through it. I didn't see, just some revisions to it, nothing.
Nothing too crazy.
Okay. Well, it looks like we will need a motion to advertise this for a public hearing. I will go ahead and make that motion that we move the ordinance 2022-0003 for a public hearing on April 19th, 2022. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Mr. Popovich, you're up on the next one, ordinance 2022-0004. This is regarding abatement of refuse and weeds, offenses and miscellaneous provisions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of these revisions to this section of the Amherst Code relates to code enforcement efforts that will permit the county to impose civil penalties rather than go through a criminal proceeding. So we need to make the necessary changes to authorize county personnel to institute civil actions.
All right, Board, do you have any questions regarding this ordinance? So I have one question. The ordinance would allow for both. You would still be able to go through the criminal proceedings as well, or are we looking more moving towards civil fines?
Looking more towards civil fines, and the way the Code of Virginia is written, if you choose to go the civil process, you eliminate the possibility of going through the criminal process. So it's one or the other. You have to pick one. Now, the county is looking to move towards the civil process because the standard for finding guilt or innocence is much lower than the beyond a reasonable doubt that is the criminal statute requirement.
All right. Are there any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that a public hearing to consider the adoption of the proposed revisions to the county's weeds and refuse abatement ordinance to permit civil penalties.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And we have another ordinance, ordinance 2022-0005. It's amending and reenacting Chapter 9, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, inoperable vehicles, abandoned and unattended vehicles.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this too is a necessary revision to authorize the imposition of civil penalties rather than criminal penalties.
Okay. Are there any questions? My only question is, under the law now, we can actually go there and remove the vehicles after a certain given time. We will put a notice, and then we can actually remove the vehicles. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, you certainly still will have that
And
capability.
you still have that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Any questions? All right.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board set a public hearing for the consideration of the attached draft revisions to its inoperable, abandoned, and unattended vehicle ordinance to permit civil penalties.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Popovich.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have, I believe we're moving on to the consent agenda. There's a plethora of items under the consent agenda. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next we have a big special presentation regarding the Central Virginia Training Center redevelopment plan. I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Rogers so he can preface it and we can have the...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to put some history on this, I was hired back in 2014, and I was told that the number one priority of the county was the upcoming closure of the Central Virginia Training Center, and that we were to get ourselves ready for that. In early 2015, the board then directed the Economic Development Authority to partner up with the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance, which was in the process of combining with the Chamber of Commerce for the region, to lead the planning, the response, to figure out what we needed to do to be ready for the closure of the training center. Well, now the training center's closed, and I think that we are ready to take the next step. So I would like to introduce Megan Lucas, the CEO of the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance, and let her talk about their efforts on our behalf with our EDA. Welcome, Ms. Lucas.
Thank you very much, Dean. Chairman Pugh, Board of Supervisors, thank you so much for taking time to allow us on your schedule today. I have a few remarks, and then I'm going to hand it over to Doug Basson, with HDR, who is going to present to you a very abbreviated version of the plan. The Central Virginia Training Center Master Redevelopment Plan will define the future of this important economic development aspect and telescope the potential of a twin community between Madison Heights and Amherst County and the city of Lynchburg. Overlooking the James River in downtown Lynchburg, the developed site will be a premier location to attract capital investment and talent, thus enhancing the area's quality of life. The plan is the beginning of an actual redevelopment and will be a directive that guides policymakers like yourselves, developers, and stakeholders toward the preferred future development of the site. However, the timeline to success is significantly impacted by the state's $25 million in outstanding debt. We appreciate our regional delegation led by Senator Newman, who's been working diligently to get the bonds defeased in the next budget. The following organizations have been involved in the planning in this redevelopment planning process: the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance, the Economic Development Authority of Amherst County, Amherst County Board of Supervisors, Central Virginia Planning District Commission, Go Virginia Region 2, the City of Lynchburg Office of Economic Development and Tourism, Appalachian Power, Banker Steel, and CSC Incorporated. Our partners realize that developing the site is critical to our region and have made it a top priority. The Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance and our partners have raised more than $482,000 to fund the creation of a master redevelopment plan for the Central Virginia Training Center. Other partners in developing this plan include the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, HDR, the Virginia Department of Health and Behavioral Services, the Virginia Department of Transportation, and the Virginia Department of General Services. I would also, again, like to mention that our elected officials at the state level, Senator Newman, Senator Peake, delegates Byron, Campbell, Ferris, Austin, and Walker, have also been actively engaged in this process. Another thanks really goes out to our regional economic developers, especially Victoria Hansen and Margette Upshur with the City of Lynchburg. As Dean said, you all instructed Dean. Dean reached out to the Amherst Economic Development Authority, who reached out to us, and together we formed a partnership to create a vision that will transform and impact our region and our urban core. It's my pleasure at this point to introduce you to Doug Bassan, who is the lead with HDR in this project.
All right, thank you, Megan. Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, thank you for this opportunity to present the plan to you.
Doug, please keep the mic close so the people on YouTube can hear you.
All right, hopefully that's better. Thank you, Dean. Yep. We're going to do a brief presentation to you today, kind of the big picture of the plan itself. So we'll get started with that. So basically the planning process started, typical planning process, look at the inventory and analysis of all the key features of the site, looking for opportunities and challenges. Out of that came this development scenario map that really kind of guided us in terms of what the potential of the site is. On this slide, you see several of the different features that we examined. And honestly, this is a complex site, lots of topography, and a lot of other things that are impacting the potential development. I mentioned the development potential map, the blue outline that you see on this map. That represents what we think is the general buildable area. Everything outward of that has too steep a topography. It would be too challenging, too expensive to move the dirt around to make development parcels. You see the black arrows, those represent key views and key view corridors. Really an amazing site when you're up there on those ridge lines and plateaus, looking out towards the James River Valley, downtown Lynchburg, and so forth. And then those red arrows, those are key site access points or opportunities, so we really wanted to accentuate those. Along with that, we always felt the right thing to do is look at a market assessment so that we know what the market viability, market potential is of various uses. So SB Friedman Development Advisors was a sub-consult to our team, and they looked at a number of different potential end uses on the site. Those consisted of residential uses, retail uses, office uses, industrial uses, and hospitality. So they took a lot of time and really fleshed out what that potential is. We'll talk about what the results of that were in a few moments. Along with that, we always want to do some kind of visioning process. So we really look at this as the three legs of the stool. There's the inventory analysis, there's the market, and then there's the vision. A plan needs all three of those things to stand in a stable manner. So the point I want to portray here is it was a very rigorous visioning process. It was right at the peak of COVID, but we were able to look at a variety of different formats to go out and get stakeholder and general public involvement, and we got significant involvement, really a lot of great ideas and a lot of good direction with that. There was a survey that was held, a big questionnaire went out that asked a lot of questions. We got great feedback from that, and then we had a kind of an online visioning workshop that explored different ideas, got feedback and comments on that, and we also had what we call a geographic mapping exercise that pinpointed key elements that exist on the site that those participants wanted to maintain or thought that we could build the plan around. So with that, with those three key elements, we created the development strategy, and essentially it breaks down as this. That from a residential perspective, we thought that we could separate ourselves from the rest of the marketplace by creating a walkable urban neighborhood, basically pedestrian-oriented and mixed use. And the goal was to provide a variety of different residential typologies. So looking at single-family, townhomes, missing middle, as well as multifamily. The goal there was to create what we call rooftops that will enable other uses to help transform that site. So from a retail perspective, the idea was embedding retail into a mixed use, we call it a village center or a neighborhood center. The idea would be that it would be upwards of about 100,000 square feet. So picture a typical neighborhood service type environment that really focuses on existing residents and is supplemented by drive-by traffic such as that would occur on Highway 210. In terms of office, We thought that upwards of 120,000 square feet would be appropriate on this. The majority of that, probably professional service, think attorneys, think accountants, think design firms, that sort of thing. But also, there could be kind of larger scale, 1 to 3 story, 20,000 square foot type office uses on the site. And then finally, industrial, think in terms of kind of tech industrial, light industrial, and upwards of 150,000 square feet. So based on that, and based on the direction of creating a walkable urban environment, we were then armed to go into the design process for creating this neighborhood. With that, we began initiating the redevelopment planning process. It was guided by a 5-day design shred, basically a week-long workshop. And the idea with this was that day one, we had a whole team of designers here. And again, our goal was to look at that development strategy and build to those square footages. So day one, we created about 7 different big picture concepts. Each of them are independent of the other. We had a pinup session that evening where we presented those ideas to the participants, the general public, key stakeholders, and so forth, and listened long and hard to their feedback. Based on their input from that pinup session the first evening, we made revisions on day 2. We repeated that process for 5 days. So the goal was we started very broad day 1, and based on feedback, each day we refined that to the point that we got a consensus-driven concept plan for the site on that final day. And that's what you're going to see here. So these pictures just represent the studio workshop setting that occurred during that week. The image that you see here is the preferred consensus master plan. And you can see it really confines itself to the topography of the site. It sits upon the ridge lines. It has a variety, as I mentioned, of different uses. Once again, a variety of residential typologies. It has office. It has some commercial uses closer to Highway 210. You have the main entrance, a brand new entrance coming in off of the highway that links up with the existing access road. We think at that intersection is probably the right location for what we're calling the kind of the village or the neighborhood center. That's the 100% corner. That's the highest density area, and then as you go outward from that point, there's a gradient of density that goes downward to the point where you get closest to the river, and you have the lowest density residential type uses. So once again, really working with the site, trying to drive density, because we know density provides rooftops, which makes all the other uses much more viable. As I mentioned before, it's predicated on walkable urbanism. So the goal is to create that pedestrian orientation, bring buildings closer to the street, try to activate the ground floor of those uses in the center, in that village center. Parking should either occur on street or in surface parking lots or parking structures tucked to the rear of the buildings. Where we do have ground floor retail uses, the building front should be permeable so you can see the uses happening inside. And then look at a variety of ways for people to move through the site, either vehicular, pedestrian, or bicycles, trying to provide a layered approach to site access and mobility. Preservation was very, very key. The thought process was not to preserve every building, but look at key opportunities for preservation, and you'll see these. There's a complex right at the entrance on the existing access road. The thought that that would make an ideal boutique hotel or an inn on the site. The farm area, thought that that would transform itself very nicely into some kind of destination use, whether it's a microbrewery or a winery, distillery, something similar. It's really set up nicely for that type of use. The water towers, rather iconic. Can you transform those with artwork and lighting into something that becomes kind of a calling card for the site itself? The cupola on the main building on the site, preserve that, have that tell the history and heritage of what's happened on the site, and have that be the focal point of one of the grand open spaces in the neighborhood. The smokestack, I'd like to preserve that. That helps wayfinding and orientation on the site. It's the tallest vertical element. And then finally, specimen trees. The state assisted with a tree inventory, identified all the large caliber trees, looked at the varieties, looked at their health, and the goal would be to preserve as many of those as possible. It takes 100 years to grow something this magnificent in many cases, so we want to use those as key focal points of the site. And then site demolition and preparation will be absolutely critical. As Megan mentioned, The debt on the site is critical, and for the success, that needs to be taken care of. It'll be very difficult getting a developer on board if you have that debt. So looking at those opportunities, site demolition clearance will be an expensive matter, so managing that in the best way possible. In terms of kind of framework elements, this would be the proposed new entrance coming in off of Highway 210. We think this is critical for getting people into the site. It creates a new opportunity for a gateway, but it's also functional. That, together with the existing route, gives you two ways in, and as I mentioned before, the intersection of those two routes becomes the heart and soul of this neighborhood. We got into some detail in terms of what typical street sections could look like. This is the Main Street area, so you see a 3-lane section, a lane in each direction, center turn lane. It has basically amenity zones where your tree plantings are, and then your throughput zone for your sidewalks, and then your buildings would front on that. So this is the most urban street section we have, and this is an extension of the street farther to the west, and it transforms into a greenway street. So you see the potential here for a widened trail or side path adjacent to that to really draw pedestrians and cyclists from that town center all the way to the ridgeline as the site drops down to the James River. This is the active mobility network, so once again that layering of a variety of ways to move through the site. So you see the shared use paths, sidewalks, you see special staircases, any opportunity for active mobility as kind of really a hallmark or a benchmark for the neighborhood itself. A lot of different park and open spaces are shown on the concept. We won't go through everyone, but this is the kind of the town square. So this is a very urban type space. You would have a mixed-use building fronting onto it. Hopefully at the base of that mixed-use building would be restaurants and retail. You could envision sidewalk cafes pouring out into the space. You have a plaza, you have a bosque of trees to provide shade, and there's a small little pavilion that you could have little performances there, as well as a water feature to kind of amend the harsh climate during the summertime and create kind of a destination for the site. This is a grand formal kind of a quad or a green. This is at the terminus where the view corridor of the main street ends. We think this is where that cupola could be saved. And again, the opportunity to interpret the history of the site. Also significant to this is where several of the large specimen trees are. So maintaining those and having those be key features of that formal green, which is wrapped by townhomes and other residential uses. So you can envision the people who live there flowing out into that space and becoming really quite a special place. Green infrastructure is very important. How do we address stormwater quantity and quality? There's a kind of a ravine type area. The idea is that we can do a series of check dams, slow down that stormwater, cause it to drop out the sediment, and turn it into an amenity as opposed to, we're all familiar of kind of more utilitarian stormwater functions and sites. And then there's a number of development opportunities. So we began to look at different building typologies and what those might look like. The upper left, you see examples of potential office. These would be those 20 to 25,000 square foot floor plate type buildings. The top right, that would be retail, inline retail opportunities, acting as liner buildings with on-street parking in front or parking to the rear. The bottom left is a mixed-use building with ground floor activation and upper floor residential units. And then the bottom right shows an urban format standalone. And this is what makes the break between kind of more conventional development and the walkable urbanism. You have your inline retailers on the left along the street frontage, and then the grocery store entrance is on the corner, but then the bulk of the parking is in that larger parking lot. And we think this is really critical to have something similar. We think this is an early phase type project that would help the master developer cash flow a lot of the rest of the project. Other building typologies, top left, missing middle. So this is that gap between single-family detached homes and apartments. These are 4-plexes, 8-plexes, 12-plexes, and so forth. On the top right, you see a pocket neighborhood. These are basically cottage homes, smaller homes that front onto a green. It's all about getting to know your neighbor and have interaction with your neighbors. And then the bottom rendering shows what that farm could look like as some kind of destination venue. So you see the potential that it has to once again help draw people into the site and use it. Here's a concept plan showing what that could look like. You see plaza space, outdoor dining space, festival lighting. You see some examples of similar projects in other locations on the right-hand side. And then implementation, absolutely critical. We developed a yield for the site looking at, based on this concept, and again, as a master developer would entertain this, that will change and shift somewhat. The vision is what's important, as Megan said. But under this concept alone, we've got just under 1,500 residential units. So we could have somewhere probably in the range of 3,000 to 4,000, maybe even more people living on that site. And once again, that will be contingent upon whatever master developer selected and the direction they take their housing typologies. Several other uses were incorporated, as we mentioned, mixed use, Class A office. We have civic uses, we have industrial and tech space, and we have a hotel, about 75 keys on that site. And then under this concept, we always want to make sure that it's real, so we show the parking, and the parking balances and addresses the needs that would be created by the various uses above. In terms of implementation, there's 3 parallel paths that will need to occur. The first one is ongoing community engagement, keeping the public informed and continuing to solicit their feedback and input. The second one is the site build out. There's things that need to be done. As Megan mentioned, your due diligence, your site preparation, and then obviously there's the vertical construction longer term. And then at the same time, there's the site control, basically how you transfer the site from existing state ownership to potentially an intermediary, and then ultimately the master developer. So we began to lay out some of what that looks like. So with that, that's a very, very quick overview. You guys have copies of the overall master plan. You'll see in that it's much more detailed than we went through, but just wanted to give you a high level and create an opportunity for you to ask any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and that would be the first thing that I would like to do is thank the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance, the Amherst County Economic Development Authority. I think Ms. Lucas named a plethora of people earlier. I can't even begin to name them all, but I know a lot of work, a lot of effort has went into this, and I applaud you for doing that. I know you take it very seriously, and as a member of the board, I appreciate that, especially knowing the work that went into this. The vision looks outstanding, beautiful. I really like the farm. That's interesting because I had a relative that used to manage that farm many years ago. A great aunt worked there, my mother worked there, 2 aunts, a first cousin, so I understand the importance of the site and the many people that work there. At one time, the training center was the largest employer in the county. We've lost that tax revenue, so it's imperative that we can redevelop this site. I know there are a lot of impediments, such as the $25 million bond issuance. There's some infrastructure deal problems there, some asbestos abatement, but the vision is what's most important, and able to get somebody in here to be able to put their eyes on this with this plan that you have is going to make a huge difference. So I applaud you all for what you have done. We really do appreciate it. Hopefully this comes to fruition, and it will be the old quote game changer, but it will be for that area of the county, because the last thing that we want is to see this place left neglected and abandoned, because it will be a disaster for the county and the region as a whole. So I thank this board too for having the foresight to go ahead and get this ball rolling, so to speak. And with that, I'll open up the rest of the board if you have any comments.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you, kind of second what the chairman said. Y'all presented this opportunistic view of what could be done there. Still got some hurdles to overcome, but I applaud you. The plan's very detailed, so thank you to all of you, your team, everybody.
I echo the same remarks, and too, as Mr. Pugh said, there's a lot of history with all the folks here in the Central Virginia area for their livelihoods and everything that has taken place at that site, and the vision to hopefully one day to put new life in it, and it will be remembered for the livelihood it provided to many people in this area, and is not sitting there as an abandoned site. Will be will be great. So I commend you all on your efforts, and this looks great, and hopefully that we can pull together and see it come to fruition. Thank you all.
Sure. So I echo what my fellow board members have said. I respect your firm a great deal. I appreciate the partnerships that have been formed. I really didn't know how many partners there were until you read the list, but it was quite a few, and it's very impressive that you could assemble a team like that. So kudos to you guys. I appreciate the vision. Definitely this would be a first for Amherst. I appreciate the way you've tried to work in historical elements into the plan to really present the history of that site, which is very important. I do have one question for you. I can't resist. So why the chicken lanes? If this is an urban type environment, why are you working in the center turn lane in the plan?
That's a great question. So when our traffic engineers looked at that, they felt that there was enough turning movement right there that to keep that, because it's that main entrance in, they felt there was the need to have those so that you wouldn't queue people up and then it would back up into that intersection.
So you're not carrying that through the entire development?
No. That is only in that very dense kind of initial area.
All right.
No, you're exactly right. Nowhere else. We would have fought really hard with our traffic engineers.
I figured you would have, but great job. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
I have another question. I guess it's the process going forward. The state of Virginia, of course, I don't know, Mr. Rogers, you might be able to talk me through this a little bit better, but it's owned by the state of Virginia. I don't know which department. Eventually, it'll be transferred to someone else. Can you go ahead and expand on that? And
So right now, the property is still held by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, DBHDS. They have not yet declared it excess. They still hold it in their inventory. They have a budget to maintain it, and they have security out there. I believe that they are waiting for the resolution of the bond defeasance, and once they know that, they will probably write the single letter it will take, declaring the property excess to their needs. They write that letter to the Department of General Services, and then General Services notifies the other agencies of the Commonwealth that this parcel is available. And we're assuming that, they've already been touching other agencies and have led us to believe that there is no interest in the property. They will then turn to us, the locality, to see if we want the property. And because we have a plan in place now, we have 6 months to decide if we want to take responsibility for it, or we want to create an organization, or create a partnership, or a coalition, and if we want to do that. My position from the beginning is it's more than we can handle, and we don't want to do that. But we will certainly explore every opportunity. Now, meanwhile, while all of this is going on, the Alliance and the EDA are out shopping this plan. They are out looking for a master developer that will either buy the whole property or will bring together a team of developers to take it on, obtain the financing, and buy it from DGS. Also during this time, DGS actually has to have the whole parcel surveyed. And how they then decide to sell it off will really be dependent upon how successful we are in finding a group of interested parties. If we can find somebody, then it'll probably sell as a whole. If we can't, they will, as they've done in other places, they might break it up into smaller parcels and sell it off that way. We have a lot to do in the next year to find someone to build this plan or something close to it. From today, however, if the board accepts this plan, what you would do is send it to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will begin studying it and finding ways to incorporate it into the county's comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plans of the county are basically the local zoning law that, once we establish it, we follow our law, and others have to follow it too. And that's how we lock this plan in, through our comprehensive plan. And that's how we exercise, put into place assurances that someone can't deviate from the plan without your specific approval. So the Planning Commission will go through all the steps and processes and public hearings and everything that's needed to build it into the comprehensive plan. And so it'll probably be back to you, whether it's all back in one piece or in several pieces, that's up to how the Planning Commission wants to handle it.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
May I follow up with that?
Yes.
Dean is absolutely spot on. I think it's critical to point out that the ask is for you all to accept the plan and direct it to planning so it can become part of the comprehensive plan. In doing so, when the state moves forward with selling the property, once you have it incorporated in your comprehensive plan, whether they sell it to one master developer who then creates a consortium, or they decide to piecemeal it out, that those developers will still have to adhere to your comprehensive plan. And so that puts protections in place so that the vision that we're trying to telescope, which will transform not just Amherst County, but really our urban core, will stay and remain in place and be beneficial for all. So it's really a critical step, really a critical next step. And DGS has communicated to us that they have put the ask out to other agencies if anybody is interested in this, and they have received a resounding no, thank you. And so our hope is that the state will take the one-time money that they have received and use $25 million of those federal funds to defease the bonds, to release the debt, remove the debt from the training center site. So then it becomes more appetizing for a developer to get engaged. That bond defeasement can either compress or prolong our ability to make something like this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Board?
Couple other things. So, yeah, I would see this, I definitely think this is ready to send to the Planning Commission for their input, and I would fully expect to see it back here for us to adopt as part of the comp plan. That's the way that works. I think it would also be important for us to ask the Planning Commission to go ahead and start looking at our zoning ordinance to make sure that we actually have the tools in place to fulfill this plan as we move forward, right?
Yes, sir. The way that we're actually doing that is, as you know, we have hired our own consultant to do Madison Heights master planning.
Right.
And that
Part of that
master
is the
plan
zoning, yep.
will incorporate this one, VDOT planning, Park Service planning, all into one giant plan, and their deliverable are changes that are needed to our zoning.
Sure. Couple follow-up questions on that. So the market analysis that was done, is that the county's fair share, or was that regional expectations?
So SB Freeman Development Advisors did the market analysis, and they look at kind of concentric circles out. So they start at the site, but then they keep going out. So it's a very much regional approach, and it's iterative. So it not only looks at what's here in the market generated, but if you do these types of things, how it can grow accordingly. So a very comprehensive approach to that.
Okay. So my experience with market analysis is that you look at the region and you can expect to, let's say the region could capture 500,000 square feet of retail, right? I guess what I'm getting at is the numbers shown or planned, is that what the county could expect to capture, or is that the entire region? Because, are we all competing for the same thing?
The way they approach it is, if we create this walkable urban neighborhood, that's what this site could capture.
Based on,
It's contingent based on creating that environment and then the ensuing attraction value.
I see. And I think some important information, maybe when this come back to us is, if we could possibly think about the number of school-aged children this might generate, and maybe what type of taxable revenue we might see from a development like this. Would be great information, but excellent job. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Martin, I did want to add, I failed to list the Department of Ag and Forestry. Jamie Glass, who is the Director of Economic Development at the Alliance, she worked with them to count all the trees.
Wow.
So we did you'll see, so the Master Redevelopment Plan is now live on trainingmasterplan.com. So you all can download the whole plan. You eventually will have a printed version of it. But there is an inventory of the trees, and that is absolutely the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And so I wanted to make sure you understood that they were a part of the team as well, a very, very valuable part.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I certainly think that those trees are worth saving, and
They're amazing.
it helps create the environment where people like to be, at least for me anyway, so.
Mr. Chair, before you take any action, I'd like to just invite the board, the press, and any members of the public that have other questions to a press conference that we're going to hold immediately after this meeting down in the administration conference room. So when you're done here, we'll move down there, and then anyone can ask any questions that they want. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. All right.
With that, I'd like to make a motion so that we accept the CBTC master plan and send it to the Planning Commission for Amherst County to include into the comprehensive plan.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Thank you all for your leadership.
All right, hopefully this is the beginning of something really good, so.
Absolutely. Count on it.
All right, next we have new business. We have the Coolwell Sports Field naming. Mr. Patrick, Mr. Bryant.
We talked about it. We flipped coins on this. As many of you know, Alan Baumgartner was a good friend of anyone he met. He was a good friend of in our community. Personally, was a good friend of mine. He passed away in September. He was the recreation specialist in Amherst County for over 13 years. I'll read a few credentials about Alan. Alan was in charge of coordinating youth sports, which included soccer and basketball. He worked with athletic departments in public schools. He assisted with the Amherst County Fishing Permit Program. He managed the fields at Coolwell Park, emphasized to many coaches, parents, and referees the impacts that sports had on children and the responsibility of
And whatever
funds.
isn't used will roll back into the general fund. It's just, it allows us their operations to continue without an issue.
Yeah, and a good friend used to say that calls come in, doors go up, vehicles have to go out, and the fire and rescue and sheriffs and other vehicles have to go. So I would make the motion that the board appropriate $100,000 from the unobligated general fund balance to a fuel coverage account for fiscal year 2022.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you.
Stacy. Hopefully gas will eventually go down, but there's no guarantee, so. Next, we have naming a road, Amherst County Public Safety, Mr. Sam Bryant.
Sir, I'm hearing that the sound is out on this meeting, so someone could check into that.
We got it back, I believe.
Okay,
So,
I think it was like YouTube or
Oh,
something
gotcha,
space. But
gotcha.
anyway, good afternoon, Chair and Board. Amherst County Public Safety is simply asking you to name a road. Banton Lane is 60 East, and it is basically the 4 property, Kelvy 4 and Tom 4. And we have an opportunity to name a road. Someone built a house there. There's real property there, and they close on their home on the 19th of April. Do you have some handouts you can give out? Ben did the work on this, so I'm going to let you take a look at this. You can ask him any questions, but basically you have 2 choices or 3. You could keep it Banton Lane, and we could give that a house number. Public Safety is responsible for the 911 addressing for the county and responsive fire and EMS resources, and that's our interest. We'd also like to help this couple get closed on the house that they built down there. Banton Lane is there, it exists. The proposed name would be 4 Lane. The other name that used to be on the property was Tootsie Bootsy Hotel Lane, and I figured you guys might appreciate 4 Lane. I spoke to both Mr. Force, Tom and Kelvy. They are fine with this. The gentleman putting the house up is fine with it. But it's basically at your pleasure to decide if you'd like to keep it Banton Lane or name it 4 Lane. If we were able to name it 4 Lane, as the property is developed in the future, it would be easier for us for response and 911 addressing. If we leave it Banton Lane, it could get a little skewed and mixed up.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Bryant. I think this is, I have no problem with 4 Lane.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board name this road 4 Lane to facilitate 911 addresses and emergency responses of fire and EMS services.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right.
Thank you.
Go. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, next we have the county administrator's reports. This is really just for your viewing. If you have any questions regarding the project status report or the boards and commissions, any questions? Mr. Rogers, would you like to say anything?
Just the latest on each of them.
All right, just the latest on each project report.
We do have to make that's something else. The motion on
The
the
next one.
building, yep.
All right. Okay, the next is the Boards, Commissions, Committee, Building Appeals Board. There's a vacancy.
Yes, sir. The term of Mr. Maynard, the at-large representative on the Building Appeals Board, expires at the end of this month. He informed us that he would be leaving the area, so he's had to resign from his appointment. We advertised the position, and Frankie Campbell has expressed his desire to fill that seat. We have no other letters of interest. So we need to know whether the board wants to appoint Mr. Campbell or continue searching, or schedule him for an interview.
Mr. Campbell built my house, and it hasn't fell down yet, so that was 17 years ago, so I don't think I have a conflict. But I'd make a motion that we appoint Mr. Franklin D. Campbell, Jr. as a representative to the Building Appeals Board for a term ending April 30th, 2025.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Congratulate Mr. Martin for us, and,
Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Campbell, evidently.
Congratulate me that my house has.
Yeah, your house hasn't fallen down, so we appreciate that. All right, next county attorney reports.
Mr. Chairman, I really have nothing except to just remind you, I think that you received a copy of the correspondence that I sent to the Attorney General's office regarding redistricting, so that has gone out, so hopefully we will get a response shortly.
All right, appreciate that. All right, we'll move on to liaison and committee reports, planning commission, which is me. At the last planning commission meeting, there was a request for a special exception in the A1 district on Early Farms Road. This, you might be familiar with it. Mr. Martin, who built it many years ago as a hunting lodge, and then I believe it became a treatment facility, and now they're looking to use it as a pastor's retreat, church, and wedding venue. It passed the board, so it'll be coming before us. There was another request for a zoning change on Dillard Road. That was postponed until the April 21st meeting. And then there will be another item coming to us regarding family division of lands, and the changes are to allow nephews and nieces to be qualified for family divisions. This passed unanimously and will be coming before the board, I would assume, at our next meeting. So all those, that's basically what we did at that last meeting, and if there's any questions, Mr. Bryant's here as well as myself. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and, Mr. Drew Wade, do you have any information on the Central Virginia Planning District?
All right, so the last meeting, we went over a financial update, went over that, but the major news there is with the retirement of the upcoming executive director. We extended an offer to Alec Brebner, who will be replacing Mr. Christie. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wade. How about you, Mr. Rogers? You have anything on the Central Virginia Transportation Planning Organization?
I don't have anything significant to report, sir. The minutes are in the board packet.
All right. Okay, this brings us back to citizen comments. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward now. And if you could, just state your name and the district that you live in.
I believe I live in District 4, but I'm not sure. I live over in Getty's Mountain.
Oh, you're
Big District 1.
District 1.
District 1,
District
okay.
1.
Okay. Anyways, my name is Robert Richards. And years ago, I purchased a piece of property over on Getty's Mountain through a tax sale. And Mr. Schrader's office conducted all the paperwork, was at the hearing in the courthouse to purchase this piece of property through the tax sale. Recently, we discovered that there are several errors in the deed as it's recorded. This was found out by Main Street Settlements on March 17th of this year. The attorney's office was contacted. I believe Mr. Gold was taking care of it at that time. He was notified. I also called him and talked to him a couple different times. There was a paperwork filed with the court to be done to correct the paperwork on that, because technically right now, evidently, we don't own it because of the errors that's been caused in that. I sent a letter to the courthouse asking the judge to process as quickly as possible, because right now we applied for a mortgage to do some more improvements on the property, but the rate of interest is locked in, but only till the 15th of the month. Okay, after that period of time, the rate of interest goes up, and after all the paperwork settled, I'm being penalized thousands of dollars for the error that's corrected in there. And I have no confidence in the being corrected in a timely fashion, and I'll explain that why. After we purchased this land through the tax sale, I talked to Mr. Schrader and asked him to go through and conduct a preliminary check to make sure there's no outstanding issues on this property, that no one can come back and claim it, and he did that. And we got a letter stating that he did go through and there was no issues on the property. A year or so after that, I purchased some additional property from Mr. Bragg, which was one of the family members that originally owned the property that adjoined it. We purchased that, and once again, I reached out and asked them to go through, double check everything, and combine the two pieces of property together. So Mr. Schrader's office or Mr. Schrader has had this in his hands 3 times now, looking at it to make sure there's nothing wrong. Once to make sure there's no problem with the deed, when he sold it to us, and once when we combined the properties together. So 3 different times, there's been the same error committed, and nothing's been done. Okay, so now that we're up against the thing, and if nothing's done immediately or right away through the court system to get this straightened out, we're out thousands of dollars. And I don't feel that's proper. Another thing, the judge has signed a order on Monday that states they can go through with the process. I got a call into Mr. Goet's office to find out, because they wouldn't answer the questions at the courthouse, the clerk wouldn't. My questions are, what's the next procedure? Does it have to go back to the court to have a hearing on it? Do the Braggs have to be reinformed? Does it have to go through all that process? How long would that take? Or is it a simple matter of just filing paperwork through their office and getting the judge to sign it? Can it be done right away? So I'm here looking for some help. The attorneys are employed by the county. It's your boss. And anything you can do to assist us in getting this matter straightened out, so we don't lose, end up penalized for all these thousands of dollars after we refinance it because of the tax going up. They were nice to extend that for 30 days, which is up on the 16th of this month. So time is short. So whatever you gentlemen can do, I would greatly appreciate.
Well, it sounds like you have some, an interesting story. I don't frankly know if there's anything we can do. Mr. Rogers?
Well, the only thought that comes to mind, and I'm going to turn to the county attorney, is, we have used the Schrader Law Office for probably decades to do these tax sales. And we've, of course, always assumed that they're done correctly. And this is the first one that we've learned of that's incorrect, but it seems like there's been multiple opportunities to get it straight.
That's right. And we do have all the documents and, where we paid it and everything else,
So I don't know what we can do. I suppose we can talk with Mr. Schrader and find out. He's beholden to the courts, and they're backed up because of all of their COVID processes that they've slowed down. Has he?
I have not had personal contact with him personally. I have talked only to Mr. Gold. He says,
right.
And he says he will be taking care of it.
I would think he could speak to the mortgage broker on your behalf and create a document that might satisfy the lender.
Well,
I'm grasping, Mark, if you can think of anything. Yeah, I was sitting here listening to it, and I really can't think of anything, but I was kind of going down the same lines as you, is that maybe there could be some kind of paperwork that can be drawn up that would be sufficient for the lender to feel assured and continue to allow that interest rate to be locked in.
Of course, they're driven by their federal regulators.
This is true.
Yeah, they're liable, they're locked into what the underwriters are saying.
Right.
Right.
And, they did reach out and try to help and work with me to extend this out, with additional 30 days to freeze that, because of, what's there in the capital and everything else in our credit rating. It's not an issue of being refinanced. The issue is at what rate and what am I being penalized?
I get that. Could I ask you to go down to my office at the end of the hall?
Yeah, I know where you're at.
On the left, and leave a note with our PIO. She's listening right now.
Yep.
Joy Niehaus. Leave her your name, your phone number, your address, and your contact information for Mr. Goad.
Okay.
Okay? And that the two of us will contact Mr. Goad and see what options I don't know that we can do anything. We have no control over the courts.
Understandable.
But, we're willing to try to think out loud with them.
Anything you do, I'd appreciate,
Please leave your information with.
I will.
with
Thank you
Mr.
very
Niehaus.
much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close citizen comments and move on to matters from members of the board. Mr. Wade?
Yeah, I've got one thing I want to bring up, and I've contacted Mr. Rogers about this. Hilltop Drive. So with the heavy rain, it's caused some problems on that road. And I know VDOT said they can't really help other than clean it up. Could we go ahead and reach out to them to have them clean up what has washed down, while meanwhile looking into other options as to how to fix it from happening in the future?
The latest email from Mr. Brown, who's responsible for our area, I believe he said he was doing that. He was going to do that. Did you get a copy of that?
I must not.
Okay. I believe he's working a resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, that's all.
That's all.
Mr. Ayers?
I have nothing.
Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I was very saddened this morning to learn of the passing of retired Fire Chief, Mr. Ernie Cash, Chief Cash. He had over 50 years of service in the fire department, and served everywhere from California to here. Was still very active even in our last fire academy, so it was a great loss for our community. I'm sure as we hear about arrangements, I'll let the board know. But great loss to our community.
Anything else? I'll echo what he said. Actually, Mr. Cash is a neighbor of mine, and he was always willing to give me an earful about what he thought was best for the county and what we should do, and I appreciate it. I'll miss those conversations. But he was one of the, today I was just sitting here signing, we give a bonus to our volunteers if they meet certain criteria. And I was on the board when we passed that measure, and he was one of the catalysts. He was one of the guys that really fought for that. And so it's a sad day, and I'll miss him a lot, but you're exactly right. He gave his life to this county for 50 years, and he was always willing to give me an earful. I remember that, and I always miss him. You know, he was just my neighbor right down the street, and it's a sad day.
He never had a harsh word for anyone.
No harsh word at all. Just what he thought we should do, and I appreciated that. You know, a lot of people come to you with problems, but very often no solutions, and he always had an idea for a solution. So the other thing I had is I also got a call from 414 Hilltop Drive. Not only was she complaining about the mud, I'm sure there was a lot of places throughout the county that had problems during that heavy rain. I know High Peak Road had some spots, mud all over it. But she was also complaining and said there was a lot of potholes and the road hadn't been paved in many years, and that the other roads had been paved. She just had a lot of thoughts about, you know, how they had been forsaken. They hadn't got what the other people in the community had gotten. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I was just passing along her message. I told her I would. The other item is I got a call from a gentleman that has some lots near Madison Heights Elementary School. And there's no Comcast service that runs down through there to those houses. And he's run into some problems with buyers because there's no internet service other than through radio, through like, you know, HughesNet or what have you, or SCS. And I was thinking that the school probably has internet there. And I was wondering why couldn't we piggyback off the school system and get internet into that area? It certainly would seem that that area of Madison Heights right there would be able to get internet connection, but I just told him I'd pass along. It's Mr. Sam Davis. I told him I'd pass along if there's anything we can think of or we can do to help facilitate that. We certainly should try, although, you know, where do you draw the line? If you help him and there's other people in the same situation.
The problem, Mr. Pugh, is you're trying to apply common sense to the government. The schools were given their internet service with federal funding, and no one can connect to the school's lines. It just can't be done anywhere. In my last place where I lived, I was 100 yards from the school, and we didn't have internet service. We had to get it through satellite, but we couldn't connect through the school. That was a different county, but it applies in this county too, and it's supreme frustration as to why they can't share a few beams of light.
Mind if I ask a question, Mr. Chair? Is that subdivision part of the Firefly expansion, as they're adding on back there? I mean, they've added,
If they're inside the
Three, four
Comcast,
houses
if they're
over the last
inside the
few years.
Comcast area, and it sounds like they are.
They are, and
We know that Comcast skips streets like this one. And so Firefly is working to fill service into the areas that have no service whatsoever. And then after it does that, it will begin working in those customers that have no service inside the Comcast area.
now, according to Mr. Davis, he can get service into that area, but it's an expense of $30,000 to get that line ran to these houses, and he thinks it's too exorbitant.
Is this his subdivision?
Yeah, right
Elementary
behind,
school?
yeah, right behind Madison Heights
Yeah.
Elementary
Yeah.
School, right through there.
right behind the library, right?
Yeah.
That might actually be included, because the backbone line that Firefly's gonna lay is gonna go, it may only go down as far south as 130.
It's only a handful of homes at this point, but there's several lots that are undeveloped.
It's the same situation as Poplar Grove. You know, it's a handful of homes, but every lot in there ought to have service, and Firefly will get to them because they don't have any. We can certainly, if Jeremy's still in here, he's not, we can find out. I mean, Mr. Davis is a friend of mine too, and I will,
He made me aware of that.
yeah.
I just wanted to bring it up, he's a longtime resident of the county and real estate guy, and I just wanted to bring it up. I know he's not the only one in those type of situations, but if there's anything we can do, we should try to facilitate that.
Yes, sir, we'll look into it.
All right, that's all I have. Next, we have a closed session scheduled. We need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I guess I got it. A closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711, subsection A3, for the purpose of discussion related to consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, or of the disposition of publicly held real property, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiation strategy of the public body, specifically related to the acquisition of properties located in District 2, 5, and 3. There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
To come out of closed session?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. Does anyone have that?
I got you. So, clarify.
Oh, excuse me. Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay.
All right, I move that the Amherst County Board of Supervisors certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each board member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion authorizing the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers? Aye. Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Pugh? Aye. So motion carries. Next, we will adjournment. Anybody have a motion?
So moved.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.